This video, we're going to talk about, is the government shutdown going to start impacting the Fed's future rate decisions? Okay, this is extremely important because depending on the outcome, I want you guys to be able to capitalize on these events, right? And this is what could lead to really good opportunities and trading in the right side of the markets, all right? Hopefully you guys like this video. If you do, please give it a like so other traders like you could have access to this information. And also subscribe and hit the notification bell so when I send these videos, you could get access to them right away. And also when I do those live streams, those live trading streams, I want you guys to be a part of, okay? There are talks out there saying that this is going to be the longest and the worst and the most impacting government shutdown we have ever had, right? And I think the last government shutdown was what, 45, 35 days or 45 days, right? But this ain't the first time. Just to talk about the government shutdown, this is political. So this is why for us as traders, we're looking for tradable opportunities. The markets don't really care that much about political events because with a shutdown, we know it's temporary. So they're going to open back up again. So this is why, like, you could see equity markets, we see the uncertainty when it happens. You could see equity start to fall off quickly, gold rise from it, but then quickly recover because it's just the algorithm spikes and it's just reacting to sentiment, right? But for it to be a long-term shift, this is just a temporary fix, right? Because when it comes to the politics, we understand that a lot of these government officials have their own agenda, right? And we know the politic game, the markets and the feds also try to stay away from it. So this is what we do. We listen to it, but we don't make our reactions a long-term perspective based off of what politics is actually going, especially when it comes to this lockdown, right? But what we could pay attention to moving forward, because the question is, how can we profit from these events as traders? And if you guys are following me, follow me on Instagram. You can pay attention to my stories. You can watch my reels. This is how we're able to capitalize on gold, equities, right? Be very consistent and profitable because in the private group, right, it doesn't matter what you guys trade. You all going to be able to react to the markets just like these institutions do. Pay attention to the markets like the way these big hedge funds do, right? Because they focus on this information. In my Discord community, we have access to news feeds. We have access to economic data, and we know how to trade it. Plus, when you join the private group, you're going to get access to the course as well, a full fundamentals course, stuff that you probably learn in college, but also know how to apply it in trade. This is how I'm able to build my wealth and trade full time, and all the other members also. But let's get back. So if you guys are interested in the private group, link is in the bio. Okay, guys? And also you can message me on Instagram if you have additional questions. I want you guys to win. But what I'm going to be paying attention to, because we already had Fed Myron coming out today talking about if the government shutdown lasts a lot longer, especially Jerome Powell said it yesterday during his press conference, where if the government shutdown continues to escalate longer, it's going to take away their opinions. They can't focus on labor data, right? They can't focus on inflation. So if they don't know which direction the data is going and is leading closer towards that rate decision, it may lead them into pausing interest rates. And we already understand the bigger picture, right? We've been seeing a decline in growth. We've been seeing a decline in labor data, but they are still data dependent. So if they don't have access to that data, how they're going to blindly make a decision and cut rates next meeting if they don't see that the trend of inflation is dropping, the trend of NFP data is dropping? That's going to lead them to come out and pause interest rates, right? And if that happens, if we start seeing that the lockdown is going to be longer than expected, it's going to go after like November, right? We're going to see it lead on more towards the ending of November or maybe December, right? We got 2 more rate decisions. So if the next rate decision leads more towards a pause, we're going to see dollar strength, right? Because that's a hawkish bias. A hawkish pause is going to happen. We're going to see dollar strength. That is going to push gold lower. That will push equities lower because if we see that the shutdown is leading lower, no economic data, feds can't see what's going on with economic data. So that's how we could be in the right side of the markets, okay? So what happens if data does come out and we see that inflation is still dropping? They give us the reports of NFP numbers. Those NFP numbers are dropping. That goes along with their trend. But if the data was worse than expected, that might lead them to go into an aggressive dovish phase where that's going to lead to more downside in the dollar. And we're going to actually see gold rise and we can see equities rise if we see that growth is still pushing lower, right? The way that they was expecting it. Slowed growth, slow labor markets. This is what causes a soft landing, right? If the feds are leaning towards a soft landing and data supports that, this is where we're going to see those 25 basis point cuts. And this is where we see dollar give weakness a little, right? More consolidation weakness. But this also supports the stock market because the data is not signaling we're seeing recessionary fears. So the fact that we don't see recessionary fears yet, that's what still supports more upside because the feds are cutting rates because inflation is heading to their target goal. But now let's talk about more aggressively, more fear. What happens if we get those recessionary fears to come in? What if the data comes out after the lockdown? Growth, labor data, way worse than expected. Those weekly jobless claims, way more people are losing jobs. NFP numbers should be way more down. Those revision numbers are even way worse. That's going to signal a recession. That's where equity markets is going to push lower, even if the feds are cutting interest rates, because the growth scares, unemployment, not being able to take loans out, take money out. That's what's going to lead the Federal Reserve to cut rates, but the markets is going to look at that as uncertainty, recession, and that's where equities push lower. That still supports gold upside because dollar is also going to push lower based off of rate cuts. So this is how none of this is guessing, right? The markets are ahead of the game. The institutions are ahead of the game, right? Because they pay attention to all of this stuff. But the fact that we don't see the data, it could start leaning towards more uncertainty, right? Because we don't see the data. And not seeing the data, if this lasts longer, this is going to be good for the gold, right? This is going to be good for the gold markets. But we could see safe havens, a risk-off environment, due to not having access to the data, right? Because it's just uncertainty. Eventually, if we could see that the government shutdown lasts a lot longer, this will eventually cause the feds, right, to actually talk about it and say, okay, now this is impacting what we should do in the future. And the moment that comes out, that's probably when the stock markets actually pushes lower, okay? When the markets actually see how the government shutdown is impacting Federal Reserve rate decisions, it's impacting their decision making. When that uncertainty finally kicks in, that's when we're going to actually see the markets care. Okay, so those are the opportunities that I will be looking for, and that's where you could catch some really, really, really good trades. This is where I'm able to capitalize on these gold buys, right? Because I'm waiting for the opportunity, but when these news headlines come out, I already know which direction the markets is going to go. It's not a guess, right? Because I understand risk sentiment. I'm paying attention to the data. I understand my price action entries, right? I have good risk management. This is all the stuff that I want you guys to get good at, okay? So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Hopefully this is informational. Remember to take notes as well, all right? And let me know in the comments how this video helps you out.